let us recap what we have learned from Module 2. Module 2 is about how DNA is replicated and then how the bases in the DNA is being translated to become functional proteins. And as you remember, proteins are the things that control a lot of body processes that actually make up a lot of your structure, from your bones to your skin to the linings of your cornea. And so basically proteins is what makes us what we are. So for example, if you see an American and he has blue eyes and you have black eyes, the cornea, the pupil, that's because the American guy has different proteins that work for him. His body produces a different type of protein that triggers the production of blue pigments in his eyes, unlike yours. So, other characteristics, for example, like being able to absorb more oxygen is also a hereditary fact. So, for example, people in Tibet's blood have found people in Tibet have blood cells that are found to be able to absorb more oxygen than the ordinary person, say for example in the Philippines. So, and why is that? That's because of the protein. So basically everything that makes up the characteristics of you as a person are in a way influenced majorly by the proteins that are produced from protein synthesis that we have studied in Module 2. And remember, that's from the DNA. Now, let's recall what we used as an analogy for the DNA. So, the DNA is like a recipe, right? So, when you have a recipe, you have the steps, what ingredients to put together to make up one dish, right? So, inside your DNA, you have there a code of C's and T's and A's and G's. And those series of letters or base letters make up a particular protein. So for example, the protein in your blood, hemoglobin. So there is a particular segment, particular gene in your DNA that codes for the particular sequence that enables your ribosome to be able to string together amino acids that make up hemoglobin, right? So again, the DNA is a set of instructions just like a recipe. Now, imagine you have a recipe for, let's say, adobong manok, right? So the recipe says use 1/2 cup of soy sauce. Imagine having to copy that recipe into another piece of paper and accidentally you have made an error. Instead of writing 1/2 cup of soy sauce, you have written 1/2 cup of ketchup. Imagine what the effect would be. So you would come up with a dish that's not adobo, right? It would turn out to be a different thing. Now, in the same manner, in the process of protein synthesis, if you accidentally change one line of instructions in the recipe, you might come up with a different protein. Okay? So that accidental change in the recipe is what we call mutation, which we have studied in Module 2. Now, if the mutation happens to be in a sex cell, a sperm cell, or an egg cell, then that change is permanent. Because remember, when the egg cell and the sperm cell fertilize each other, when a sperm cell fertilizes an egg cell, the two would combine their DNA, and then the combination makes up the zygote, a single cell, and then that zygote would develop into different cells that would eventually become a human being. Meaning, if you made a change in the recipe in one of the proteins in that single sperm cell or in the egg cell, then that permanent change will always be propagated in the new person. So it will be transmitted through the generations after the parent. So imagine you do that small change in the recipe every generation. So this generation, instead of writing soy sauce, you change it to ketchup. The next generation, instead of writing you get 1/2 kilo of chicken, you change it to 1/2 kilo of beef. All of a sudden, now you end up with a different recipe, with a different protein in this case. Now, say for example, the protein that is created now, the new dish, is actually more efficient at absorbing oxygen compared to the original protein in the original recipe. That might be the explanation why people from Tibet now actually have been found to have hemoglobin cells that are more absorbent, or that has more capacity for absorbing oxygen than the other people. So for example, and remember, Tibet is such a high place, it's way above sea level, that the atmosphere is actually thinner in their country. And so if the atmosphere is thinner, there is thinner oxygen, and so maybe evolution has found a way such that their bodies can actually absorb more oxygen. Okay? So if you think about that, now the dish